"You stole from a billionaire," Richard Hale said, standing in the rain with a disgusted smile. "And now she's going to see exactly what kind of man you are." Claire Whitmore heard the words before she saw the house. It sat at the end of a narrow gravel road outside Dayton, Ohio, a small white rental with peeling trim, a sagging porch, and one yellow light burning in the front window like it was trying its best not to give up. Her black SUV idled behind her, windshield wipers ticking like a nervous clock. Richard held an umbrella over himself, not over her, and stared at the place as if poverty were contagious. "Miss Whitmore," he said, lowering his voice, "we can let security handle this. Men like Ethan Walker always have a sad story." Claire didn't answer. Her hand rested against the pocket of her wool coat, where the clasp from her missing diamond necklace had been placed in a small evidence bag. Ethan had been the last man seen near the service hallway. Ethan had refused to explain why part of the necklace had fallen from his toolbox. Ethan had looked her straight in the eyes and said, quietly, "I didn't take what wasn't mine." No begging, no anger, no performance. Just a tired man with rain on his collar and dignity in his voice. Now Claire stood at his door, wondering why guilt had followed her all the way here. Richard knocked hard, too hard for a house this quiet. A small shuffling sound came from inside. Then the door opened a few inches, and a little girl with pale blonde hair and sleepy blue eyes peeked out, wrapped in an oversized gray sweatshirt. "Daddy," she whispered. Claire's breath caught. The girl looked up at her, then at the umbrella, then back into the dim room. "Are you from the hospital?" Richard frowned. "Where is your father?" The child stepped back, frightened by his tone. Claire lifted one hand gently. "It's okay, sweetheart. Is your dad home?" The girl nodded toward the kitchen. Claire stepped inside before Richard could stop her, and what she saw silenced every accusation she had carried. The room was poor, but spotless. A pair of tiny sneakers sat neatly by the door, both patched with white thread. Children's drawings covered one wall, each one showing the same man holding the same little girl's hand under a brighter sky. On the coffee table sat a bottle of heart medicine, a stack of overdue bills, and half a peanut butter sandwich cut into two careful triangles. On the couch lay Ethan's work jacket, folded over a thin blanket, still damp from the rain. Then Claire saw the note. It was written in purple crayon on lined school paper, the letters uneven and innocent. "Daddy didn't eat dinner, so I could have medicine." Claire stared at it. The house seemed to hold its breath. Behind her, Richard muttered something about manipulation, but his voice sounded far away now, small and ugly against the quiet truth of that room. From the kitchen, Ethan Walker appeared, holding a chipped mug of hot water like it was supper. He stopped when he saw Claire. No fear crossed his face. No shame either. Only concern as his eyes moved to his daughter. "Lily," he said softly, "go sit by the heater, baby." The little girl obeyed, clutching the sleeves of his sweatshirt around her hands. Claire looked from the note to Ethan, then to the empty plate beside the sink. Something inside her broke, not loudly, but completely. This was not the home of a thief counting stolen diamonds. This was the home of a father measuring love in skipped meals, patched shoes, and one last dose of medicine. Her umbrella slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft, wet sound. Ethan took one step forward, confused. "Miss Whitmore." Claire tried to speak, but no words came. The billionaire who owned towers, airplanes, and boardrooms full of men who feared her could only stand in a poor man's living room with tears running down her face. 48 hours earlier, Ethan Walker had not known Claire Whitmore's name would reach his front door. He only knew the electrical panel behind the charity ballroom was overheating, the lights above the stage were flickering, and the maintenance supervisor had called him in because no one else wanted to crawl behind the service wall in a dress shirt and a pair of worn work boots. The Whitmore Foundation gala was already glowing with money when Ethan arrived, all crystal glasses, soft jazz, polished marble, and people speaking in voices that never seemed to worry about rent. He moved along the edge of the room with his toolbox in one hand and a folded photograph of Lily tucked inside his shirt pocket, close to his heart. She had smiled for that picture in front of a drugstore Christmas display, missing one front tooth, holding up a paper star she had made from a cereal box. Every extra job Ethan took was for her medicine. Every late night was for one more bill he could keep from becoming a disaster. Near the dessert table, a young waitress with trembling hands was being cornered by Richard Hale. "That necklace was on Miss Whitmore 10 minutes ago," Richard snapped. "You were the last one near her table." The waitress shook her head. "Sir, I only refilled the water. Then open your apron pocket. People turned. Not all at once, but enough. Curiosity has a quiet cruelty when it wears expensive shoes. The girl's face reddened as she reached for her apron, and Ethan stopped walking. He looked at Richard. He looked at the girl. Then he looked down. Near the leg of a silver serving card, half hidden beneath a linen fold, lay a tiny broken clasp, bright as a frozen tear. Ethan bent, picked it up with 2 fingers, and held it out. This came loose, he said calmly. Richard stared at him. And who are you? The electrician. Then fix lights, not reputations. A few people chuckled. Ethan did not. He simply placed the clasp on the table beside a water glass and said, "Truth does not need a title." Across the room, Claire Whitmore heard him. She had been speaking with a senator's wife, wearing a black evening gown, diamond earrings, and the kind of careful smile that kept loneliness invisible. Her necklace, an heirloom from her grandmother, rested against her collarbone, or so she believed. She turned just as Ethan stepped away from Richard without demanding thanks. That caught her attention more than any insult would have. Most people in her world reached for credit before they reached for kindness. Ethan reached for neither. A few minutes later, the ballroom lights dipped hard, and a nervous murmur spread through the guests. Ethan disappeared behind the service door. In the narrow utility corridor, the air smelled of warm dust and old wiring. He shut off the breaker, tightened the loose connection, and waited until the current steadied. When the chandeliers brightened again, applause floated through the wall, but none of it was for him. He did not mind. Men like Ethan had learned to live outside the spotlight. When he returned to gather his toolbox, Claire was standing near the hallway entrance. "You help that waitress," she said. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. She was scared. "You did not know whether she was innocent." "I knew she was alone." Claire studied him, searching for the angle, the hidden request, the practiced humility. She found only fatigue and steadiness. "Most people would have waited," she said. Ethan lifted his toolbox. "Most people do." Before she could answer, Richard appeared behind her, eyes narrowed at Ethan as if dignity itself had offended him. "Miss Whitmore, your guests are waiting." Claire looked back once as Ethan walked toward the service exit, his boots leaving faint dust on the polished floor. She did not yet know that in less than 2 days she would stand inside his home and cry over a purple crayon note. She only knew that something about the quiet man in the faded denim jacket had made a room full of powerful people seem smaller. By the time the last guest left the gala, the grand ballroom no longer looked magical. The flowers sagged in their glass vases, candle wax cooled in pale rivers along silver holders, and the marble floor showed the tired footprints of people who had smiled too long. Ethan Walker was back in the service hallway, kneeling beside the breaker panel, checking the final voltage reading before he could go home. It was almost 11:30. Lily would be asleep by now, or pretending to be, waiting for the sound of his key in the front door. He had promised to bring her medicine before midnight, and promises were the one thing he could still afford to keep. He closed the panel, packed his tools, and was reaching for his jacket when the service door swung open. Richard Hale stepped in first, followed by 2 security guards and Claire Whitmore. Her expression was calm, but the calm had weight behind it. Richard pointed at Ethan's toolbox. "Open it." Ethan looked from Richard to Claire. "Is there a problem?" "The necklace is gone," Richard said. "Miss Whitmore's grandmother's necklace. The one worth more than your house, your truck, and whatever sad little savings account you keep pretending will save you." The words hung in the corridor, polished and cruel. Ethan did not answer them. He only glanced at Claire, as if giving her the chance to be better than the man speaking for her. Claire's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. "Open the toolbox," Richard repeated. Ethan set it on a metal cart and unlatched it slowly. Inside were wire cutters, pliers, electrical tape, a flashlight, 2 screwdrivers, a receipt from the pharmacy, and a small pink hair tie Lily had wrapped around the handle for good luck. One security guard moved the tools aside. Then something tiny clicked against the bottom tray. A diamond, no larger than a raindrop, caught the fluorescent light. Richard smiled before anyone else breathed. "Well, well." Ethan stared at the stone. For one brief second, confusion crossed his face, clean and honest. Then it was gone. "That is not mine," he said. Richard laughed softly. "Of course not. It is hers." Claire stepped closer. Her missing necklace had not been found. Only one loose diamond from its setting, but the sight of it in Ethan's box felt like a door closing. "Mr. Walker," she said, and her voice was quieter than Richard's, which somehow made it heavier. Can you explain why part of my necklace is in your toolbox? Ethan looked down at the pharmacy receipt. 9:47 p.m. Pediatric cardiac refill. Paid in cash. His jaw tightened, not from guilt, but from time slipping away. No, he said. Richard lifted his eyebrows. That is your defense. That is the truth. The truth is that you were near the service hallway. You handled the broken clasp, and now a diamond is sitting with your tools. Ethan closed his eyes once, then opened them. A list of convenient facts is not the same as truth. The hallway went still. Even the old pipes seemed to stop humming. Claire heard the steadiness in his voice and hated that it made doubt feel complicated. A guilty man would plead. An angry man would accuse. Ethan did neither. He stood there in his faded denim jacket, hands rough from work, shoulders tired from carrying a life no one in that building had bothered to see. Call the police, Richard said. Ethan shook his head. You can do what you need to do. I need to get home to my daughter. Richard stepped into his path. You are not walking away from this. Ethan met his eyes for the first time. I am not running from you. I am going to a child who needs medicine. Claire looked at the receipt again. Something in her expression softened, then guarded itself. Let him go, she said. Richard turned sharply. Miss Whitmore. I said let him go. Ethan picked up his toolbox, but before leaving, he placed the loose diamond on the metal cart with careful fingers, as if even under accusation he would not carry what did not belong to him. At the exit, he paused just long enough to look back at Claire. I am sorry about your grandmother's necklace, he said. Not because I took it, because I know what it means to lose the last thing that still feels like family. Then he walked into the cold Ohio night, leaving behind a billionaire, a smirking advisor, and a corridor where the truth had just become harder to ignore. Ethan walked out of the service entrance into rain that felt colder than November had any right to be. The parking lot behind the ballroom stretched wide and empty, washed in yellow security lights and silver puddles. He did not look back. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend himself to the brick wall, the dark windows, or the expensive people still deciding what kind of man he was. He only checked the time on his cracked phone. 11:42 p.m. The pharmacy closed at midnight. Lily's last dose would not wait for his pride. His old Ford pickup started on the second turn, coughing once before the engine settled. On the passenger seat, the white pharmacy bag waited beneath a folded receipt, and Ethan touched it the way some men touched a Bible before a hard day. I am coming, baby, he whispered, though no one heard him but the rain. Behind him, Claire Whitmore stood just inside the service doorway, watching the red taillights disappear toward the county road. Richard Hale came up beside her, holding her coat as if that made him useful. That was a mistake, he said. A thief with a child is still a thief. Claire did not take the coat. You sound very sure. Because I have seen this pattern before. Sympathy first. Excuses second. Lawsuit third. He left the diamond behind. Richard smiled thinly. Because you were watching. Claire turned then, slowly. And the pharmacy receipt? Convenient. His daughter? More convenient. The words settled badly in the air. Claire looked toward the hallway Ethan had walked through, its fluorescent lights buzzing over scuffed tile and stacked banquet chairs. Something about that man's silence bothered her. Not because it was suspicious, but because it was disciplined. People lied with too many words. Ethan had answered with fewer than a guilty man would need and more pain than an innocent man should have to carry. She remembered the way he had picked up the diamond with careful fingers and placed it back where it belonged. She remembered his eyes when he said he knew what it meant to lose the last thing that still felt like family. Her grandmother's necklace had been more than jewelry. It had been the one soft inheritance in a life built out of contracts, headlines, and empty rooms. Richard cleared his throat. Miss Whitmore, I strongly recommend we file charges tonight. Claire looked at him. No, not yet. His smile faded. With respect, hesitation is how people like him get away with things. Claire reached for her phone and called her driver. Follow the blue Ford pickup, but keep distance. I want an address. Nothing more. Richard stared at her. You are going to his house? I am going to understand what happened. You already know what happened. Claire stepped into the rain, and this time she took the umbrella from his hand herself. No, Richard. I know what you told me happened. The drive out of downtown Dayton took them past shuttered storefronts, gas stations glowing under wet awnings, and neighborhoods where porch lights burned. Like small acts of faith, Claire sat in the back seat of the SUV, watching Ethan's truck 2 blocks ahead. It did not speed. It did not swerve. It stopped once at the pharmacy drive-through window, where Ethan waited with both hands on the steering wheel, head bowed as if counting breaths. Then he drove another 11 miles toward the edge of town, where the roads narrowed and the houses grew older, smaller, quieter. Claire's phone buzzed with messages from board members, security, and Richard, who was in the second vehicle behind them, still insisting on legal action. She silenced them all. At last, Ethan's truck turned onto a gravel lane. Claire watched him park outside the little white house, grab the pharmacy bag, and hurry up the porch steps. A light came on inside. Through the rain-blurred window, she saw a small figure rise from the couch. Ethan knelt immediately, his whole body changing the moment he saw his daughter, as if the accused man from the ballroom had been only a coat he wore in public, and this gentle father was the truth underneath. Claire leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. Ethan opened the medicine bottle, measured a dose, and held it patiently while Lily drank. Then the girl touched his face, asking something Claire could not hear. Ethan smiled and shook his head, pretending he was not hungry, pretending the empty kitchen behind him did not matter. Claire had spent years reading balance sheets, contracts, and men who wanted something from her. But through that small window, in a house worth less than one painting in her office, she finally read something she could not dismiss. A man can be poor and still be rich in character. A man can be accused and still hold on to dignity. And sometimes, grace begins with the decision to follow the truth home. Claire did not knock right away. She stood beneath the weak porch light with rain slipping from the edge of her umbrella, watching the small house breathe through its thin walls. Inside, Ethan Walker moved quietly from room to room, not with the hurried shame of a man hiding something, but with the careful rhythm of a father trying not to wake a sick child. He placed Lily's medicine back in the cabinet above the sink, then opened the refrigerator. Claire could see almost everything from where she stood. Half a gallon of milk, 3 eggs, a jar of grape jelly, 1 plastic container with something small and pale inside. Ethan looked at it, then closed the door without taking anything out. Lily's voice floated from the couch, soft and tired. "Daddy, did you eat at work?" Ethan turned with that gentle smile fathers use when they are trying to keep fear out of a child's room. "I had something earlier, sweetheart. Was it good? Best meal in Ohio." Lily smiled because she wanted to believe him. Claire did not. She had negotiated hotels, factories, and international contracts without blinking. But the sight of that empty refrigerator pressed against her heart in a way no boardroom ever had. Ethan filled a chipped mug with hot water from the kettle and sat at the kitchen table. He did not add tea. He did not add coffee. He just wrapped both hands around it for warmth and closed his eyes. The house was poor, but nothing in it was careless. The floor had been swept. The dishes were stacked neatly beside the sink. A tiny pair of pink gloves had been dried on the radiator. On one wall, Lily's drawings were taped in rows, bright crayon suns over crooked houses, stick figures holding hands. One picture showing Ethan wearing a paper crown with the words "My dad is brave" written across the top. Near the front window sat a shoebox labeled Lily's surgery fund in black marker. Claire leaned closer, and through the glass she saw the lid was slightly open. There were no bills inside, no savings, no envelope thick with hope. There were only folded slips of paper. Ethan reached for one and added another note with a pencil worn down nearly to the eraser. "Skipped dinner, $8 saved. Extra wiring job, $35 saved. Sold winter coat, $22 saved." Every line was a small sacrifice pretending to be a deposit. Every number was dignity written in pencil. Lily shifted under the blanket and looked toward him. "Daddy." "Yes, baby." "Are we poor?" Ethan did not answer too quickly. He looked around the little room, at the old couch, the patched curtains, the heater rattling like it had one more winter left in it if God was kind. Then he stood, walked to her, and tucked the blanket under her chin. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "We are just waiting for better weather." Claire stepped back as if those words had opened something old inside her. Better weather. Her little sister used to say that during the worst years, when their mother worked double shifts and dinner sometimes came from it split 3 ways. Claire had spent half her life outrunning houses like this, promising herself she would never again need anyone's mercy. Yet here was Ethan, with less than she had ever feared having, giving his daughter not a lie, but a shelter. Richard's second vehicle rolled up behind her, headlights sweeping across the wet porch. Claire turned sharply and lifted one hand, warning him to stay back. But it was too late. The light caught Lily's face through the window. The child saw a woman standing outside and slowly rose, carrying Ethan's damp work jacket around her shoulders. Before Ethan could stop her, Lily opened the front door a few inches. "Are you from the hospital?" she asked again, her voice polite because Ethan had taught her kindness before suspicion. Claire lowered the umbrella. For a moment, she could not remember how to be powerful. She could only see a sick little girl, a tired father, and a home so full of grace that shame belonged to everyone who had judged it from the outside. Ethan appeared behind Lily, his face tightening when he recognized Claire. He did not slam the door. He did not accuse her of following him. He simply placed a steady hand on his daughter's shoulder and said, "Miss Whitmore, whatever this is, please do not frighten my child." The sentence was quiet, but it carried more authority than any title Richard Hale had ever used. Claire looked past him, toward the table where the shoebox sat open, where sacrifice had been counted one skipped meal at a time. She swallowed hard. "I came for the truth," she whispered. Ethan's eyes held hers, tired and clear. "Then you should come in out of the rain." Claire stepped inside, and the first thing she noticed was not the poverty. It was the care. The little entry rug had been brushed clean, though its corners were frayed. A glass jar near the door held loose buttons, pennies, and one small paper flower made from a grocery receipt. The air smelled faintly of rain, children's medicine, and the kind of soup that had been stretched too far. Ethan closed the door behind her, then guided Lily back to the couch with a tenderness so natural it made Claire look away. "Stay warm, baby," he said. Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed on Claire with quiet curiosity. "Are you the lady from the big party?" Claire hesitated. "Yes." "Did Daddy fix your lights?" Ethan drew a slow breath. Claire answered before he could. "He did." Lily smiled proudly. "He fixes everything." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Ethan did not correct her. He simply walked to the kitchen table and moved a stack of bills aside, not to hide them, only to make space. "I was going to bring this back tomorrow morning," he said. Claire followed his gaze. On the table sat a clear plastic sandwich container with a blue lid. Inside, resting on a folded paper towel, was her grandmother's necklace. The chain was broken. One small setting was empty where the loose diamond had come free. But it was there, whole enough to be recognized, protected like something sacred in the only container he had. Beside it was a note written in Ethan's careful block letters, found near service hallway after event. "Return to owner." Claire stared at the container, then at him. "You found it." After everyone left, Ethan said. "It was caught under the rubber mat by the service door. The clasp must have broken earlier. I put it away so it would not get swept up or thrown out." "Why did you not say that when Richard searched your toolbox?" Ethan looked toward Lily. "Because he found the diamond first, and because my daughter needed her medicine. Some truths can wait 10 hours. A child's breathing cannot." Claire's throat tightened. On the counter, she noticed a tiny pink hair clip with one broken wing. It had been set beside the sink, uncovered, while a necklace worth more than most homes in that neighborhood rested safely inside the best container in the house. "You used this for my necklace," she whispered. Ethan followed her eyes. "It was clean. But your daughter's clip is just sitting there." "That clip is already ours," he said quietly. "Yours needed protecting until it got back to you." The room became still. There was no speech Claire could give herself that would make her feel less ashamed. She had watched men in custom suits steal through contracts and call it strategy. She had watched executives hide greed behind polished language. Yet this man, who had less food in his refrigerator than she had in a private airport lounge, had guarded a billionaire's necklace because it was the right thing to do. Lily lifted her head from the couch. "Daddy said we do not keep lost things," she said. "Even shiny ones." Claire pressed one hand against her mouth. The child said it without accusation, without knowing she had just judged a room full of adults more cleanly than any court could have. Ethan stepped closer, concern softening his face. "Miss Whitmore, are you all right?" Claire tried to nod, but the tears came before permission. They slipped down her cheeks as she looked at the patched sneakers, the surgery fund shoebox, the empty mug of hot water, and the necklace protected in plastic, as if honor could be measured by what a man did when no one was there to applaud him. Outside, Richard's headlights cut across the curtains, harsh and white. Inside, the house glowed with one weak lamp and more dignity than Claire had felt in years. She reached for the sandwich container with trembling fingers, then stopped. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking around his name. "I am so sorry." He did not smile. He did not make her apology easy. He only looked at his daughter, then back at Claire. I do not need you to be sorry for me, he said. I need people like you to be careful with people like us. Claire closed her eyes, and the truth of that sentence settled into her heart with quiet force. This was not just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a mirror. And for the first time in a very long time, Claire Whitmore did not like what power had allowed her to become. The apology had barely left Claire's lips when the front door opened without a knock. Richard Hale stepped in carrying the rain with him, his polished shoes leaving wet marks across Ethan's clean floor. He looked around the small living room, at the old couch, the patched curtains, the medicine bottle, the crayon drawings, and his mouth tightened with the kind of contempt that does not need permission to enter. So this is the performance, he said. Lily pulled the blanket up to her chin. Ethan's posture changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. He moved one step to the side, placing himself between Richard and his daughter. You are in my home, Ethan said. Speak carefully. Richard gave a short laugh. Your home? This place looks like it is one missed payment away from becoming a storage shed. Claire turned toward him, shocked. Richard, stop. But Richard had mistaken her tears for weakness and Ethan's quiet for surrender. No, Miss Whitmore, this is exactly how it works. A sad little house, a sick child, a noble father with rough hands and wounded eyes. It is manipulation dressed up as dignity. Ethan did not move. His hands stayed open at his sides. His voice remained low. You can insult me outside. You can insult me at your office. You will not do it in front of my child. Lily whispered, Daddy. Ethan looked back just long enough to soften. It is all right, baby. Richard pointed toward the sandwich container on the table. And there it is. The necklace magically appears after we follow him home. How touching. Claire stepped forward. He was going to return it. Because he got caught. There is a note. A note he wrote himself. There is no evidence he stole anything. Richard's eyes flashed. There was a diamond in his toolbox. The room fell silent, not because Richard had one, but because something in the sentence sounded too prepared, too polished, too eager to close the door. Claire looked at him. How did you know it was in the bottom tray? Richard blinked. Security found it. You were the one who told them where to look. I told them to search everything. No, Claire said slowly, her voice changing. You said bottom tray before anyone opened it. Rain tapped against the windows. The heater rattled once and went quiet. Ethan's eyes shifted from Claire to Richard, but he still said nothing. A man with dignity does not rush truth. He lets it stand up by itself. Richard adjusted his cuff. This is absurd. Claire reached into her coat and pulled out her phone. Then you will not mind if I ask my head of security to send me the hallway footage directly. Not the clipped version you forwarded. The original file. Richard's face hardened. It is nearly midnight. Then he is probably awake. She tapped the screen and placed the call on speaker. The line rang twice. Miss Whitmore, a tired voice answered. Daniel, I need the raw security video from the West Service hallway, all camera angles, from 9:30 to 11:30 tonight. A pause. The raw file, ma'am? Yes. Another pause, longer this time. I thought Mr. Hale already reviewed that with you. Claire looked at Richard. He did. I want what he reviewed before he touched it. Richard stepped toward her, lowering his voice. Claire, you are making a serious mistake. Ethan took one calm step forward, not toward Richard, but closer to Lily. Do not crowd her in my house. The sentence was quiet, but it stopped Richard cold. Not because it threatened him, but because it reminded everyone in the room what respect sounded like when it had nothing to prove. Lily slipped from the couch and took her father's hand. Her fingers were small around his, but the gesture made Ethan's whole face change. Claire saw it and felt the shame deepen. This child had watched adults bring suspicion through her front door like mud. Daniel's voice returned through the phone. Ma'am, I'm sending it now. But you should know something. The original has a gap in the export Mr. Hale gave us. About 4 minutes missing. Claire's eyes did not leave Richard. Which 4 minutes? The phone chimed in her hand as the file arrived. Daniel said, the 4 minutes before Mr. Walker returned to the hallway. Richard's expression went flat. No outrage. No confusion. Just the cold stillness of a man whose careful wall had heard its first crack. Claire ended the call. Outside, thunder rolled far away over the Ohio fields, soft but certain. She turned to Ethan, then to Lily, then back to the man who had walked into a poor home thinking money gave him the right to measure human worth. Richard, she said, her voice steady now, step outside. He forced a smile. Gladly. No, Claire said. Not gladly. Quietly. And for the first time that night, Richard Hale obeyed. By morning, the rain had stopped, but something heavier had settled over Whitmore Holdings. The glass tower in downtown Dayton rose into a pale gray sky, clean, silent, and colder than the little house Claire had left behind. At 8:15, she walked into the executive conference room with no entourage, no practiced smile, and no patience for polished excuses. 12 board members sat around the long walnut table. Daniel from security stood near the screen with a laptop open. Richard Hale occupied his usual seat near Claire's chair, dressed perfectly, posture perfect, face arranged into the calm expression of a man who believed powerful rooms protected powerful lies. Ethan Walker stood by the far wall in his faded denim jacket, because Claire had asked him to come, and because he had told Lily the truth matters even when it is uncomfortable. He had not wanted the attention. He had not wanted revenge. He had only wanted his daughter to grow up knowing that decency was not weakness. Claire placed the clear sandwich container on the table. Inside it lay her grandmother's necklace, broken but safe. No one spoke. The faint hum of the heating system filled the room like a held breath. Claire looked at Daniel. "Play it." The screen lit up with security footage from the West Service hallway. At first, it showed nothing unusual. Servers passed with trays. Ethan entered once to fix the electrical panel. Claire's necklace, caught on the edge of her shawl earlier, slipped loose near the service door and fell beneath the rubber mat as she walked away. Several board members leaned forward. Richard did not move. The footage continued. 10:26 p.m. Richard entered the hallway alone. He looked both ways, bent down, lifted the mat, and picked up the necklace. He studied it for a moment, then removed one loose diamond from the damaged setting with a small tool from his pocket. A soft gasp moved around the table. Richard's face remained still, but the color drained from his lips. On the screen, he walked to Ethan's toolbox, opened the bottom tray, and dropped the tiny diamond inside. Then he carried the necklace away. Daniel paused the video. The silence that followed was not empty. It was judgment. Claire turned to Richard. "Why?" Richard straightened his cuffs as if cloth could restore character. "You were becoming sentimental. The housing redevelopment vote was today. That neighborhood has been delaying us for months. A man like Walker would have become a symbol, and symbols cost money." Ethan's eyes lowered for a moment, not in shame, but sorrow. "That neighborhood is full of families," he said. Richard looked at him. "It is full of underperforming property." Claire's voice cut through the room, quiet and final. "You are finished here." Richard laughed once, too softly. "Claire, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. For the first time in years." She turned to the board. "Mr. Hale is terminated immediately. Legal will review every redevelopment file he touched. Security will escort him out, peacefully and professionally." Richard stood, his chair scraping the floor. "You are choosing a handyman over $1 billion project." Claire looked at Ethan, then at the necklace in the plastic container, then at the men and women who had built careers around numbers but forgotten names. "No," she said. "I am choosing truth over convenience." Security stepped beside Richard, not roughly, not theatrically, simply present. The power in the room shifted without noise. Richard picked up his folder, but his hands trembled just enough for everyone to see. As he left, nobody followed him with sympathy. Nobody defended him. The same executives who had once nodded at his arrogance now stared at the table, trapped inside their own silence. Claire faced Ethan. "Mr. Walker, what happened to you was wrong. I believed too slowly. I am sorry." Ethan did not bask in it. He did not smile for the board. He only thought of Lily sitting at home with a borrowed storybook and a blanket around her shoulders. "Do not apologize to me in a room like this unless something changes outside of it," he said. A board member shifted uncomfortably. Claire nodded, accepting the rebuke like a lesson she had earned. "Then something will change." Ethan's voice remained gentle, but it filled the room more than anger could have. "My daughter needs to know the world can still be fair. Not perfect. Fair." Claire looked around the table. No one interrupted. No one chuckled. No one checked a phone. For once, money had nothing useful to say. And in that high-glass room above the city, a single father with worn boots and quiet dignity made an entire boardroom remember what respect sounded like. 3 weeks later, the little white house at the end of the gravel road no longer felt like a place the world had forgotten. The porch had been repaired, the heater replaced, and the front window held a new curtain Lily had picked out herself, yellow with tiny white flowers because she said it looked like better weather. Ethan had argued gently against every improvement Claire offered, not from pride that refused help, but from dignity that needed help to mean something honest. So Claire did not hand him a blank check. She did something harder. She listened. The redevelopment project was canceled, then rebuilt from the ground up as a community housing repair program, and Ethan Walker was hired as its field supervisor because he knew which roofs leaked, which furnaces failed, which families were too proud to ask twice, and which elderly neighbors pretended they were fine when winter came early. He wore the same work boots to the first planning meeting, and no one laughed. The Lily Grace Fund began with one hospital bill paid quietly, then became something larger. Claire put her name behind it, but not above it. The fund covered heart procedures, medicine, transportation, and hotel rooms for parents who could not afford to sleep near their children after surgery. When reporters asked why, Claire gave no dramatic speech. She only said, "A child's breathing should never depend on a parent skipping dinner." Lily's surgery came on a bright Tuesday morning. In Cincinnati, 70 miles from Dayton, with Ethan sitting in a vinyl chair outside the pediatric wing, turning his cap in his hands. Claire sat beside him, not as a billionaire, not as a rescuer, but as someone who had learned that presence can be a form of repentance. "You do not have to stay," Ethan said. Claire looked down the hallway where nurses moved softly under warm lights. "I know. Then why are you still here?" She folded her hands. "Because once, someone should have stayed for me." Ethan did not ask what she meant. Some pain deserves room before it becomes a story. Hours later, when the doctor came out smiling, Ethan stood too fast, then stopped, as if hope itself had made him dizzy. "She did beautifully," the doctor said. "Your daughter is going to be all right." Ethan covered his mouth with one hand. Claire looked away to give him privacy, but she heard the sound anyway, the quiet break of a father who had been strong so long he had almost forgotten he was allowed to be relieved. 2 months after that, Lily returned home with more color in her cheeks and a drawing tucked under her arm. Claire came by on a Sunday afternoon, not in a black SUV this time, but in a modest blue sedan she drove herself. Ethan was on the porch fixing a loose railing for the third time because Lily kept using it as a balance beam. Inside, Lily taped the new picture to the wall. It showed 3 people standing in the rain beneath one umbrella. Behind them, the clouds were opening, and the sun was drawn so large it nearly filled the sky. "That is us," Lily said. "Daddy, me, and Miss Claire." Ethan looked at the picture for a long moment. Claire stood beside him, her eyes shining again. Lily noticed immediately. "Are you crying again, Miss Claire?" Claire laughed softly through the tears. "A little." "Why?" Claire knelt so she was eye level with her. "Because your daddy reminded me what rich is supposed to mean." Lily considered that, then nodded like it made perfect sense. Ethan stepped onto the porch and looked out over the repaired steps, the wet grass, and the quiet road where judgment had once arrived in headlights. He had not shouted his innocence. He had not begged to be seen. He had simply kept his hands clean, his voice steady, and his love faithful in a world too quick to measure worth by what a man owns. Claire joined him at the doorway, and for a while neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It was grace. It was respect. It was the sound of second chances taking root in ordinary soil. And in that small Ohio home, where a purple crayon note had once broken a billionaire's heart, dignity did what money never could. It healed what pride had damaged. It made room for mercy. And it taught everyone who entered that the richest homes are not always the largest ones, but the ones where love is willing to go without so someone else can breathe.